The Wilderness Solo, the most standardized season ever. First, 8 contestants were given skill training and equipped with 10 survival tools, including sleeping bags, tarps, knives, and saws. The resources at the survival location were scientifically assessed to ensure fairness and justice in the competition. Jesper was the first to enter. Pointing at a tilted birch tree, he declared it his home for the night. In the wild, they face harsh weather and fierce animals, potential injuries, and possible emotional breakdowns. For Jesper, a self-proclaimed geek, the biggest challenge was living without Kola, his main source of strength and happiness. A shaman skilled in botany, he normally uses his psychic powers to heal others. Now, he must rely on his plant knowledge to satiate his hunger. Although he found a patch of blueberry bushes, they were not yet in season. He also found a broken oil drum, unsuitable for raft making, but perfect for making a fireplace or smoking fish. The most pressing task was to start a fire. Using dry bark, he ignited a hopeful flame, but needed to gather more wood to keep it burning. Along the way, he discovered fresh bear dung. Although aware of potential encounters with wolves, badgers, and grizzlies, and equipped with a safety pack for immediate rescue, the actual threat still unnerved him. Emma, a 21-year-old contestant, aimed to become the youngest champion of Wilderness Solo. Full of dreams but untested in strength, she quickly set up shelter as rain approached. She chose a wind-sheltered spot, cut down a spruce tree, removed excess branches, and created a sloped roof, covering it with a tarp secured by stones. Just as she finished, the rain began. Emma, a vegetarian of 5 years, faced a significant challenge in fishing, and even more in killing fish. She had consulted her father for survival tips before participating. After setting up her fishing net, she had to enter the water without clothes, too shy to be filmed. The newcomer, Alfred, with his good looks, could have easily been in a talent show, but chose to test his skills in this challenge. Using his keen hearing, he located a stream, indicating abundant fish. After securing food and water, he built a shelter on a flat, open meadow. Thinking quickly, he climbed a tree, bent a trunk to form a horizontal beam, covered it with a tarp, and secured it with ropes and sticks. The next morning, Emma rushed to check her net, only to find it stuck. She had to enter the water herself to rescue it, soon finding her boots filled with water, necessitating another undressed dive, stressing her on just the first day. Meanwhile, Alfred, after stripping to lay his net, nearly froze. Deciding to build a raft, he chopped spruce branches, bound them with nylon rope into a ring shape, and secured it with additional branches. After trimming the tarp and wrapping it around the raft, he found a Y-shaped branch and made an oar with the tarp. Ready to launch, his successful first voyage elicited an ecstatic howl. Alfred caught an eel. After 2 days without food, he eagerly started to eat. However, by his expression, it seems the taste was not so good. He had to swallow it down with water. He tried the eel soup, but it was just as hard to eat. Yet, to survive and win $500,000, he closed his eyes and drank it. The camera then moved to Miguel, who tied 3 sticks together to create a triangular structure. After setting it up and covering it with waterproof fabric, he made a conical tent. There was no pressure standing inside, and even after placing all his gear, there was still plenty of space. Miguel had a 3-year history of drug use but managed to pull himself back on the brink. Reconnecting with nature and the support of his family, especially his beloved daughter, greatly healed him. However, he nearly gave up after just 2 days on the island. Another contestant, Kim, was happy to catch a big fish with his net, but sadly watched it escape while retrieving the net. To prevent this from happening again, he decided to build a dock. He cut down several large trees, removed the excess branches, and built 2 tripods that he placed in the water. He then laid some logs on top to create a pedestrian bridge. Carefully, he walked on it to set up his fishing net but fell before he could start. He discovered a deep cut on his shin after getting ashore. In the wilderness, untreated wounds can lead to infections and force one to leave, but driven by the money, he persevered. After treating his wound, he began to reinforce the dock, adding more logs for stability, and eventually boasting about its sturdiness. Miguel, unaware of when he caught another eel, simply fried it in a pan. It was delicious. Just moments before, he had considered quitting because he missed his daughter, but now he felt he could stay another 6 months. Emma, not catching any fish, resorted to picking chicken of the woods mushrooms to stave off hunger. As she prepared her mushroom feast, she decided to apply some hand cream. After refueling, she decided to upgrade her shelter. The day quickly passed, and the next morning at dawn, Ida headed to the lake, sure of finding fish. A seasoned outdoors woman, she enjoyed horse riding and was knowledgeable about various fish habits. Her proficient spear fishing in the sea showed her toughness. Soon she had 5 fish, securing a week's meals easily. Some focused on food, while others on shelter, knowing a sturdy and insulated shelter was essential to win the challenge. It needed to protect them from wolves and keep them warm in winter. Jesper nearly completed the structure and bedding of his house. He used whole pine logs for the walls and later filled the gaps with moss. His survival strategy was to finish building before running out of stored fat. However, age affected his stamina, and soon he was lying exhausted on the grass, pondering the difficulty of wilderness living. His poor strength and vision led to an accident while transporting wood, injuring his foot on a stone. In the wild, even minor wounds can lead to infections. Cleaned the wound, applied a bandage, and kept it dry and clean, then began to doubt his suitability for wilderness survival. Jesper was attacked by wasps in the wild. In the spirit of not wasting food, he arranged to have skewers which tasted like steak. Compared to the harassment others faced, Ida's situation was unbearable. At night, many ants crawled near her, and she hardly slept due to the many bites on her face. To get a good night's sleep, she had to move her sleeping bag to the riverbank. Although there were no ants there, the mosquitoes that reappeared left her feeling hopeless. The camera then shifts to Torben. After arriving on the island, he has been busy building a shelter, using quality materials for the cabin, which is spacious inside, even decorating the floor with marble. Now that it's finally complete, he can focus on finding food. But despite being busy until dark, he hasn't found anything. Stina has caught nothing for 3 days straight, and might quit if she doesn't catch a fish soon. To increase her chances, she made several fishing lines, but her casting was poor, managing only a 2-meter throw. Then, she just lay on the rocks, looking up at the sky, praying for food. Kim, the only one who didn't build a shelter, focused on getting food. He first built a dock and today constructed a raft, successfully lowering the net into a 25-meter deep water area. If he still doesn't catch any fish, it must be bad luck. He has a happy family of 4 in Coaling City, but prefers living outdoors year-round, mastering many survival skills. Fishing, hunting, and building are easy for him, but he faced disappointment when he found the net empty. The boat and dock were a wasted effort. After much thought, he concluded that the lack of fish was because the area simply had none, so he decided to survey the terrain for a new campsite. While others worried about food, Alfred had started considering nutritional balance. Eating grilled fish for days caused constipation, so he turned to the berries from the bushes, enjoying them in the sunshine. After observing the surroundings for a few days, he found a perfect spot for his shelter. First cutting down a large central tree for a beam, tying it with ropes and cutting a notch at the base of the tree to bring down the main beam with the help of the ropes, then frenziedly collecting materials to build a sturdy, warm shelter. Since Ida caught 5 fish, it seemed like the fish in the area were scared off, with no catches for days. Helplessly, she collected berries to stave off hunger, which reminded her of her family. Last summer, she lost her father, which deeply saddened her, and her love for horses became her new family, helping her through the gloom. Her reason for competing was to find happiness and strength again. Stina also secretly wiped away tears, saying she couldn't help crying when hungry. After eating grass for 5 days, her body was completely depleted. Seeing her trembling on the shore, one worried she might fall into the lake. On the 5th day, she caught 3 fish, 2 small and 1 slightly larger, finally showing a slight smile. It was now a joyful time to eat, and no adjective could fully express her inner satisfaction. She is a woman with strong control and slight OCD, which has caused troubles in her life, often disliked by her husband and children. Her purpose in participating was to learn to control her emotions and treat her family kindly. Jesper's shelter is almost finished. He is sitting inside, considering where to place the fireplace and door. Suddenly, he stands up and rushes out, because the moose he missed the other night has returned. Today, Jesper went to check the fishing nets and found a 10-pound fish. Seeing a week's worth of food, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Kim's dock did not disappoint him either. He caught a large trout, and holding the biggest fish of the season, he was very happy. He held it in his arms for a long time, then kissed it passionately. Since getting a 5-kill streak, Ida has not been able to catch any fish. Now, she can only rely on some tree roots to stave off hunger. These plant roots are rich in starch and taste like potatoes. To make the roots more palatable, she cooked them with chicken of the woods mushrooms, but they still didn't soften after a long cook. In the end, she had to settle for sipping a few mouthfuls of the broth. On her way back to camp, she couldn't help crying, regretting her decision to come here and wishing she had her handsome boyfriend with her instead. On the 6th day, a storm hit the island. Alfred found his tent leaking, almost soaking all his belongings. To protect his gear from the rain, he decided to hurry and finish building his new home. The camera then moved to Kim, whose residence was completely flooded by rising lake waters. The stream in front of his door turned into a waterfall, so he had to pack his bags, take down the tarp, and move to the other side of the mountain. This spot he had scouted earlier was sunny, sheltered from the wind, and rich in berry resources: blueberries, blackberries, cranberries, and more. He also found a fallen tree to build a hidden shelter near a bay, a natural fishing spot. Suddenly, the production crew's boat appeared, and Stina decided to quit the contest, missing her husband and children too much. Since arriving, Alfred's fishing catches have been consistent, and he worried about how to store so many fish. Ida, frustrated by not catching any fish, was completely upset. Crying, she returned to camp and took out her fishing line, deciding to tie a few fishing rigs to try her luck. On day 7, the long-missed sun finally appeared. Torben quickly dried some moss to insulate his house. Previously, such tasks were done by apprentices, but now he had to do it himself. At 42, he is a self-employed carpenter with strong hands-on skills, making him somewhat famous locally. His house, meticulously built against 4 large trees and filled with logs. The next morning, Ida cried again on camera, saying she lost her most important item, her saw. Today is the last day, and she didn't want to quit, but missed her father greatly, valuing family more. Soon after, the production crew's boat appeared. After 8 days, 2 contestants were out. Perhaps influenced by previous survival shows, this season's challengers focused heavily on building their houses. Emma's house was finished after several days unseen, and she was now crafting a real wood bed. Suddenly a scream was heard. Ow! No! But she didn't give up and quickly finished the bed, laying pine branches for a good night's sleep. The next morning, she started the final step, making a frame with branches and tying pine branches to create a door, saying it would help her feel more secure. Compared to others, Kim's progress is much slower due to moving and having to start from scratch. Fortunately, the chosen location is good, and not many materials are needed. The frame was quickly assembled, but unfortunately, it started raining. They had to cover it with a tarp to get through the night in the rain. After a heavy rain, the temperature dropped significantly, and the lake level rose considerably. Alfred only caught 3 small fish with his net, while Miguel had worse luck with no catch at all. As a fitness coach, Miguel enjoys training his team in nature, saying it relaxes the body and the outdoor air boosts mental strength. He dislikes sitting alone, so he planned ahead to avoid boredom. However, it has been raining for the 9 days since his arrival, hindering his planned activities and prompting him to consider quitting the competition. The rain also caused trouble for Emma, who had stored her fish in a bag held down by a rock in a creek, only for it to become a flood. She attempted to retrieve it, but was deterred by the strong current. Now, she can only hope for the rain to stop so she can check if her food is still there. Jesper caught a large fish, enough to sustain him for another week. He cleaned it efficiently and soon enjoyed a delicious meal, likening it to the juiciest steak in the world. Suddenly, he saw a donkey in the distance. Despite his careful approach, he startled it, and the donkey, curious, began to approach him. Jesper was thrilled at the prospect of additional protein, but the donkey sensed danger and fled into the woods. Jesper was snapped back to reality by distant shouting. In the heavy rain, Miguel caught his first fish since arriving, which excited him enough to sing and dance. He immediately cooked it in a smokehouse he had built days earlier, only now being used for the first time. The smell of the fish made him homesick. Despite his reluctance to leave all his food behind, he decided to let fate decide his stay. He counted 20 pairs of leaves and decisively called on a satellite phone. Despite a decent life on the island with shelter and food, loneliness overwhelmed him, and he was happy to return home to his daughters. The Wilderness Survival Challenge lasted 13 days with 5 out of 8 contestants remaining. It rained continuously since their arrival, occasionally accompanied by hail. Jesper, holding a piece of rock candy, cursed his luck. He reminisced about the beautiful beach on the first day, which promised a relaxed lifestyle with sunshine and hammocks. Now, all he could do was pray. The newly built houses were at risk of flooding if the rain continued. Meanwhile, Torben, due to the poor weather, had to pull in his fishing net, but unexpectedly caught a small fish. However, his joy was short-lived as a sudden downpour began. Alfred caught a tree branch first, then 2 small fish, and astonishingly, a shark. Overjoyed, he nearly suffered a mishap, but managed to secure the shark, ensuring a week's worth of food. To prevent it from escaping, he stunned it with a large rock. Since there was too much to eat alone, he skewered the fish together, found a damp, mossy spot, and buried them. Since moving, Kim spends a lot of time every day getting water. The physical toll is huge, and he only manages to stave off hunger with berries. As the big fish he last caught is long gone, he reminisces about his glorious past, diving for coral, catching big fish with lure fishing, building igloos in the Arctic, and catching foxes. Now, he is starving here. So he packs his gear and heads to the bay where the dock is built, hoping to catch some fish. However, the recent heavy rain had destroyed the dock, leaving only a few logs washed ashore. Luckily, he has a raft that allows him to set nets, but today the wind is too strong. After struggling, he fails and returns home wet and cold, waiting for better weather. Every time he sees Alfred, he is either cooking or eating fish, yet despite his smooth progress in the challenge, he starts to dislike the taste of the fish, suspecting it might be spoiled. For safety, he decides not to eat it, realizing that storing fish in moss isn't reliable. He needs to find another way to preserve the fish. Meanwhile, Emma is cooking. Having been constipated for 13 days, she starts adjusting her diet with a piece of fish, a handful of berries, and a pinch of wild vegetables. A perfect mix of protein, vitamins, and fiber, hoping it will help. The camera turns to Torben, who seems to be struggling as he eats grass, and Alfred, who might also be constipated from eating too much grilled fish. To address this issue, Emma increases her daily workload to get moving, sings to ease her anxiety, and tries to express herself in front of the camera. But unfortunately, none of these methods work. After 13 days without a bowel movement, Emma is ultimately brought to tears. On the 14th day, Jesper is finishing his new house. Watching the rising water levels, even flooding an anthill he found earlier, makes him anxious. With the last stick placed on the wall, his cabin is completed. He decorates it with a skeleton he found days ago. Satisfied with his hand-built cabin and its unique decor, he even makes a totem out of bones. Today is the routine health check day. Emma honestly reports her health condition, but chooses not to give up. However, the next morning, the crew's boat appears again, and with Emma's departure, only 4 survivors remain in the challenge. Who will be the next to be eliminated? Kim, in his quest for food, commutes back and forth daily from his shelter to the bay, ending up with nothing and cursing all the way back. The recent weather has been either rainy or windy, leaving even the skilled fisherman Alfred returning empty-handed with just seaweed in his net. Yet, on a day when everyone else returns empty-handed, Torben manages to catch a fish, small but life-saving, especially in these harsh conditions. A little turn of fortune brings immense hope. By the 15th day, the weather worsens, making it difficult to secure food and endangering their living places. The lake level rises 40 centimeters overnight. If this continues, the painstakingly built cabins will soon be flooded. To survive, Kim must take a risk and try setting the net again. Armed with previous failures and a strong desire to win, he finally manages to overcome the wind and waves and sets his net properly. However, the journey home is long. 3 round trips in one day exhaust him completely. On day 16, yesterday's water depth of 40 feet rose to 2 meters today. It seems one might need a boat just to leave the house now. Jesper's house has already turned into a water pavilion. Considering personal safety, although reluctant, he has to evacuate temporarily. Alfred's cabin also has multiple leaks. It's damp next to his bed. After a few rounds, he finally locates the leaks, and starts fixing them. Watching the water drain into the sea, Alfred feels as joyful as a child. Torben's cabin wasn't spared from the flooding either. He decides to move his home to the other side of the mountain. First, he moves the old house's timber to the new campsite. Then he ties a log between two trees and lays some sticks on top to create a simple flat roof. Finally, he covers it with a waterproof tarp, securing his shelter for the night. Sitting in his new home, thinking about how his big villa turned into a simple shed and seeing his fishing nets tangled, he feels sad. Meanwhile, Jesper is still looking for a campsite. Wind-sheltered spots are all waterlogged, and dry spots face the wind. After searching for a long time, he just sets up a makeshift shelter and lights a campfire at the entrance to make do for the night. The next morning, he rushes to his original cabin hoping the lake water has receded, only to find the water level even higher. Moving back to the original shelter is now impossible. Kim's home is the only one spared from the flood, justifying his daily trek through mountains and waters. Now settled on a southeastern hillside, it is elevated and shielded from the wind. The weather doesn't bother him much. After lighting a campfire, he enjoys smoked fish and a pot of hot tea, living quite comfortably. On day 17, after half a month of rain, it finally clears up. The sunshine heals everyone's body and soul, but a new challenge begins as the food supply runs low. Jesper, undeterred by the cold, strips down and dives into the water to retrieve his fishing nets, surprisingly catching 2 fish, a salmon and a slightly larger trout. He quickly cooks the fish and enjoys them at the shelter's entrance, savoring the delicious meal. After eating, he crafts a wooden fish from a stick, initially as a hobby. Then, remembering fishing and crabbing with his son, he kisses his son's photo and carves a wooden fish as a gift for him. Alfred checks his fishing nets by the river. As he slowly pulls up the nets, fish continuously surface. There are 6 fish. Having been hungry for days, he immediately sets up a grill on the shore. Smelling the aroma, he can't wait for the fish to fully cook and starts eating right away, not even sparing the fish brains, devouring everything. Jesper's life is also pleasant. After eating 2 big fish, he feels satisfied. To add a bit of flavor to his life, he picks some horseradish leaves and brews tea, surprisingly tasting a hint of cola flavor. Kim's fishing nets were carried away by the rising tide. He had no choice but to take off his pants and go into the water to look for them. His previous wound showed slight signs of inflammation. The upper part was healing well, but the lower part was a bit red, indicating a risk of infection. He faced a choice: withdraw for treatment or keep going. He decided to see what he caught that day before making a decision. After searching for a while, he found his net, but it was stuck at the bottom of the lake. He pulled with all his might and ended up tearing the net. Fortunately, he had another net in the deep water, which he quickly retrieved with his kayak. It was filled with fish of various sizes. He counted 11 in total, bringing him a step closer to winning. He hung the fish to dry inside his house and then began gathering materials to smoke them. His leg injury was now an afterthought. Torben was not so lucky. Both of his fishing nets were damaged beyond repair. Losing his nets meant losing his source of food in this place. He didn't think he could survive on grass alone, so he decisively called the show's crew to go home. His chances of success here were 0. When he couldn't catch fish, it meant giving up the competition. With Torben's departure, only 3 of the original 8 contestants remained. Since his encounter with a moose, Jesper had been fixated on hunting. He made a large vow to start hunting wildlife. He had experience hunting wild boars, and despite the years, he believed he still had the skills. On day 19, the weather cleared and the tide receded. Jesper moved back to his original cabin. Hanging family photos on the wall instantly made it feel like home. After making his bed, he began practicing archery. His posture looked impressive, but the accuracy was uncertain. After a few days, he seemed like a wild man, soaking up the sun when tired and meditating by the lake when hungry. Perhaps pity from above allowed him to catch 2 fish, though his eating was a bit wild. Re-energized, he resumed his wilderness journey, climbing to the mountaintop with his bow and arrows, attempting to summon the moose through meditation. On the other side of the mountain, Alfred was enjoying the sunset while eating grilled fish. He had lost count of how many fish he had eaten during this time. Given the current situation, as long as there were no accidents, outlasting his opponents and winning seemed likely. Kim's waterproof roof covering was torn off by the wind, leading to a shivering night. At dawn, he started fixing his shelter. He cut down several large trees to secure the waterproof covering on the roof. He then used reindeer lichen he had dried a few days earlier to stuff into the walls for insulation. Lichen not only provided good insulation, but could also be boiled for soup if there was no food in winter, serving a dual purpose. After fixing the exterior, he patched up the interior. The cabin was noticeably warmer. Now, with a warm place to stay, plenty of smoked fish, and enough firewood, he should be able to last until the end of the competition. On day 20 of the challenge, Jesper suddenly started catching fish non-stop, saying it was as easy as shopping at a supermarket. His cabin smelled of 5 smoked fish on the grill and 2 boiling in the pot. After failing to hunt deer, he prioritized fishing to store enough food before winter. Meanwhile, Kim's cabin was filled with fish fillets. Recently, he only ate the fish hearts and heads, sparing the rest. The sound of him eating made one imagine how delicious it was. Besides, he was collecting berries before they froze, storing over 10 kilograms, enough for half a month. On the other side, Alfred caught what might be the season's biggest fish. He boasted before the camera, then stunned the fish with a large stick. Despite the fish's resilience, Alfred's diet caused worsening constipation, prompting him to find and eagerly eat some cranberries and blueberries to balance his diet. Days passed with fishing, eating, and sleeping. Boredom made the days feel longer. Jesper made a bow drill to pass time, proudly lighting fires without needing flint. The tea tasted better from the fires he made. Everything seemed fine until a cold snap changed the fate of the 3 on day 25. As it got colder and plants frosted over, upgrading shelters and storing food became critical. Alfred had a bountiful day fishing but struggled to light a fire with stiff, frozen fingers. He decided to build a door for his shelter using wooden sticks and spruce branches for insulation. On day 27, Jesper appeared with a cup of orange liquid, claiming it cured all ailments when drunk on an empty stomach, leaving the specifics to the imagination. By day 28, the cold intensified. Alfred's boat was frozen, and he chipped off a piece of ice to eat, likening it to eating ice cream. He set out to lay fishing nets, hoping to store more fish before everything froze. Kim also checked his fishing nets in the bay, struggling to free them but managing to catch 5 fish. Survival Challenge Day 28. Jesper presents a slice of raw fish to the camera, visibly satisfied. With winter food shortages, he has rationed this fish over 3 days, and now only a fish head remains. His visible weight loss is concerning. He fears he won't last much longer without more food. Alfred's pectoral muscles have significantly shrunk. Despite eating fish, the lack of fat intake is problematic. Kim is rationing his diet, dividing 5 fish over 3 days. However, this amount is insufficient for an adult man. He has also collected worms as bait, hoping to catch more fish. Jesper is in poor condition, feeling incompetent and losing the will to continue. He uses a satellite phone to quit the competition, leaving before using the bow and arrow he made. It's now down to Alfred and Kim. The key to surviving the winter is a warm shelter. Kim is reinforcing his to withstand frost at night, while Alfred gathers berries before the cold worsens. As berries become scarcer, he builds a natural icebox to store them, checking for rot and finding none. Although berries are beneficial, long-term survival relies on fishing. Kim's recent catches are smaller, but still substantial. He retrieves his fishing nets every 3 days due to the exhausting terrain. To outdo Kim, Alfred deploys 2 fishing nets, hoping for a double catch to increase his chances of winning. Alfred's substantial catch of 5 fish revitalizes him. He returns to his shelter and prepares grilled fish. Constipation remains a significant issue for Alfred and other contestants. Meanwhile, Kim's situation includes a 10-square-meter luxury wooden cabin, finely made and well insulated, with berries like cranberries, blackberries, and blueberries nearby. His craftsmanship ranks among the best in recent seasons. By day 42, food acquisition becomes more challenging. Kim returns from a fruitless fishing trip at the bay, disheartened by the wasted effort. Alfred carves a candlestick as a gift for his mother, missing her. 2 days later, it's time for Kim to retrieve his nets. Pulling hard, he accidentally tears one. He checks another net by boat, which is also stuck. Fearing another loss could end his competition, he relies on berries to stave off hunger. After eating, Kim crafts a hook from wire to salvage the net. His effort pays off when he successfully retrieves the submerged net, finding it contains a large fish and 6 others. Overwhelmed with joy, tears flow from his eyes. Alfred predicted a storm by observing the night sky. To prepare, He collected many spruce branches to seal the door gaps. He then protected the roof and filled all cracks in the walls. After securing his shelter, he turned the boat upside down to prevent it from being blown away. The next day, strong winds hit. Alfred's house nearly collapsed, so he cut more branches to weigh down the roof before seeking refuge inside. However, the wind was so strong it blew the tarpaulin onto his grilled fish, which frustrated him. He doubted if his cabin could withstand the hurricane. Meanwhile, Kim, whose cabin was on the lee side of the hill, was leisurely making a fire and drinking tea inside. By day 53, it began to snow on the island, making food even scarcer. Alfred's nets caught no fish, and the one Kim caught was tiny. Facing food shortages, Kim dug up fly larvae he had buried earlier. Using them as bait seemed wiser than eating them. Days later, he found the larvae still on the hook. Berries were his only food, and he considered eating maggots for survival. On day 58, Alfred's net finally caught a fish. Though just one, it could have been crucial for survival. Surprisingly, he quit the competition, citing homesickness. Had he known he was the last struggling contestant, he might have regretted his decision. But life is unpredictable, and one must stand by their choices. After Alfred left, Kim won the championship. The crew conducted a medical check, secretly bringing his family to him. His wife and children surprised him, and he cried with joy. He showed them his cabin and shared his stored berries. This concludes this video. See you in the next one.